and welcome to Dare to Know, interviews with quality and reliability thought leaders. I'm Tim Rogers, and today I'm pleased to welcome Doug Plucknette. Doug is a consultant, trainer, and practitioner at Allied Reliability Group in Rochester, New York. Doug started in the pipefitter apprentice program at Eastman Kodak in 1981 and worked his way up to become a maintenance supervisor and reliability engineer. He left Kodak in 1999 and founded Reliability Solutions Incorporated, consulting on reliability-centered maintenance. He joined Allied Reliability Group in 2007 and lives now in Rochester, New York. Doug is the author of Reliability-Centered Maintenance Using RCM Blitz and Clean, Green, and Reliable, both publications available at reliabilityweb.com. Doug, welcome, and thanks so much for joining us today.
Hey, Tim, it's good to be with you.
Doug, I'm sure a lot of our listeners have heard of reliability-centered maintenance, or RCM, but could you give us a quick definition and explain how RCM is different from preventive maintenance?
In terms of RCM and the difference between reliability-centered maintenance and preventive maintenance, RCM looks at a complete maintenance strategy, which includes what some folks call predictive tasks. In the world of RCM, we call them on-condition tasks. That's using some type of technology to detect failures early on, whether it's vibration analysis, thermography, ultrasound. There's lots of technologies out there that can be used, as well as failure finding tasks to check for hidden functions or for failures of hidden function components. So PM is just time based, and it only really applies to about 7% of the components in a given factory, and that's coming from several studies. First study done by Nolan and Heap, all the way to a study that I did in 2003 to show that the components we have in the manufacturing world fit the same type of profiles as they do in the airline industry.
I'm sorry, you said that only 7% of the, you were talking about preventive maintenance only covering a very small percentage of the available space when it comes to all this.
Yes, Nolan and Heap's data said that 11% of our failures were wear-based.
Uh-huh.
And when I look at that 11%, it's certainly more cost-effective to apply some type of on-condition task as opposed to a PM where we need to stop and be intrusive in looking to see or measure wear.
Mm-hmm.
If we can do that with a technology where the equipment is running, then that number drops from 11% to 7%, and I would say in reality it's probably even closer to 5% these days.
Wow!
With the improvements of predictive technologies that are out there.
Boy, there's a lot of people that hang their hat on preventive maintenance. They really believe that this is, a pretty significant element of any quality and reliability program. I guess it's a little surprising that it's not as, it may not be as effective as a lot of people believe.
Well, it's only effective on things that are wear-based and are measurable, right?
Right.
We don't want our PMs to be subjective where somebody says, check the pump or check the belts. What does that mean? Let's measure where we can measure our wear, and from those measures say, all right, what was this component? How did it measure out when it was new? How much is it worn? And how much further can it wear before it will fail or no longer provide the function necessary to keep the equipment running?
Got it.
So if our PMs aren't measurable, they're really not effective.
Yeah, that makes sense. Doug, your book and your blog describe a methodology called RCM Blitz. I wonder if you could help us understand exactly what RCM Blitz is and what some of the advantages are for that technique.
All right, RCM Blitz is a methodology I developed way back in the 1990s, about the mid-90s, when I was at night school at RIT here in Rochester, going for reliability engineering courses. I had been introduced to a couple different forms of reliability-centered maintenance, and none of them really focused on manufacturing equipment and the issues we deal with in maintaining manufacturing equipment. They were all done in instances like the airline industry or in the nuclear power industry where you could have these catastrophic failures that result in the loss of multiple lives. Whereas in a manufacturing plant, especially those that I had worked in, Eastman Kodak had a wonderful safety record. It was very, very rare that somebody would be killed at work.
Sure.
In all the years that I worked at Kodak, which was 19, I want to say our safety record, we had been 50 years without an on-site fatality, and that's at a company that employed over 100,000 people, right? So I looked at how they were doing RCM, and I said, really, what we need to understand is what are our critical assets? Let's apply RCM to that because there's some time investment involved in doing RCM. And so let's apply it to critical assets that are struggling and where we can do this process and then get a return on investment for the time it takes to train people, perform the analysis, implement the tasks, and actually perform the task. And so I put this process together and said, gee, in the environment that we're working in today, where a maintenance manager and operations manager those roles tend to change every 2 or 3 years, I needed something that we could go in, do a quick analysis, get things implemented, and show results in less than 6 months. Because if I could get their attention in that kind of time frame, then it would be something that they'd stick to. They'd say, we need to do more of these. And that thought process actually worked. We developed a database where we can not only facilitate but enter data live, and also developed a way to say, let's figure out a way that we can make the analysis come off within a week. So do the entire analysis in 1 week and then spend between a month and 3 months implementing it. And once we start implementing, then we can show results. And that's really been the key of why RCM Blitz has been successful, is that we can go in and very quickly show results and show people the importance of doing the right things in regard to maintenance.
I agree 1,000%. Anytime you can show some quick results and build credibility, it really helps get people on board. This methodology you described sounds a lot like Kaizen Blitz. Is that sort of what gave you the idea?
Yeah, Kaizen had been around. I think it actually came to when I was at Kodak. Came after Blitz.
Uh-huh.
Blitz, of which I had nothing to do with, but it's a similar thought process to say let's focus on something. One of the things I will say is RCM is a bit more disciplined than what Kaizen is. We've got 7 steps that we follow that come from the SAE standard for RCM, and we stick to those things. So it's a pretty rigorous process, and that's why I made the decision. Let's do this on critical assets as opposed to just saying, okay, go out and pick something and do an RCM on it, and you'll get results. Well, that might be true. I'm the type of person that learned that in maintenance, one of the things that we were lacking is that the business skill to show operations managers, and then beyond that, upper level executives, the payback for investing and doing the right things in maintenance. And that's really what I wanted to be able to show is this whole thing connects, and it makes tremendous business sense, right down to measuring overall equipment effectiveness and the impact that doing an RCM can have on even. We've had examples where we've lowered unit cost of product by doing RCM. And when you can show that to not only an operations manager but a corporate executive, all of a sudden they're very interested in what's going on.
Yeah, well, that's definitely where the rubber meets the road, right? Doug, I wanted to reflect a little bit on your professional background. You've had a very interesting career path, going from a pipe fitter and a journeyman up to reliability engineer and now an RCM trainer. Can you talk a little bit about how your experience in all these different roles has helped you in your consulting work?
Well, that's one of the things I think that makes me stick out and makes me different when it comes to other consultants. Is I've been that person that's in the trench. I've been the person that's been called in the middle of the night, or I've She said, I've been called in on Christmas Day before,
Sure.
deal with some type of operations or production emergency. And I also know the value of what I learned in my apprentice program, and I tell people that on a regular basis. That there's things that I learned as an apprentice that I still apply today as I'm doing RCM and trying to get people to understand there's a right way to do maintenance and a wrong way. Right, most of our failures, and I'm working on doing data on this now, some mass data to support the fact that most of our failures today are really results from poorly installing our equipment, doing a poor job, whether it's alignment, balancing, torque, uh, pipe stress, you name it. I mean, there's all types of things that are going on out there because we aren't doing a good job of formally training and certifying our people that we allow to go out and maintain our assets. Worse than that are the folks that are installing them, right? What's your background? What's your experience? I've worked with customers in the last 2 years that, I see equipment being installed to go out and ask people, please explain why you hooked up this pump this way where there's not enough straight run on the suction of this. This is never going to work the way it is. And Bill will say, well, that's the way it was in the drawing. Well, that doesn't mean it's right. You have to challenge that. As a tradesperson, if the engineer didn't pick it up, somebody needs to say something, or the people that bought that and paid for it are going to live with that issue for the rest of the time they have that asset. Because companies just don't spit out money to fix things that weren't done right when they were installed.
Right. No, it's despite all of our improvements and despite all the technology, people can still be the weak link, right?
Exactly, and that's the thing is that I'm reading about and almost biting my tongue on some of the stuff that's out there today with the the industrial Internet of Things and big data, and I'm saying to myself, if we can't install it right in the first place, all that stuff is meaningless.
That's a very good point.
Right? None of this is new, by the way. The industrial Internet of Things has been around so long as there's been a PLC or a DCS to operate our equipment.
That's right.
Did we take the time to teach our people to understand the relationships of the process that we're operating? Right? What's the relationship between pressure, temperature, flow, timing, amp draw, all those things we can build relationships and correlations from, and we've been able to do that for more than 30 years, right? And in that 30 years, it's sad to say, apprentice programs and formal training have gone away, and the state of what I'm seeing out there is, in terms of the skills that are available to companies, they have less options today than they had 30 years ago.
How about that?
So we need to reinvest in those apprentice programs, and I know that hopefully that will never become a political thing. It seems like everybody I talk to, regardless of where they fall on a political spectrum, says, "Yeah, you're right, Doug. We need to get companies involved in apprentice programs again."
Doug, this reminds me a little bit when we spoke earlier. You were telling me the difference about the difference between lighting a fire under people versus lighting a fire within people.
Yeah.
Can you elaborate a little more on that for our listeners?
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that I was so lucky to learn when I started at Kodak is I started in a group that it was we had 28 guys in our maintenance work center, and of the 28, 26 of us were under 30 years old. And I had no idea when I first went there why that was. And then after a couple of weeks, kind of found out that, well, we were all there and because the work was heavy, and a lot of it was outside. It was either really hot or really cold. And in Rochester, it can get cold and snowy and nasty. So 50% of our equipment, or I should say 70% of our equipment was outside, 30% was inside. The stuff that was inside in the summer was miserable hot, and I'm talking 120 degrees or more, plus humidity. And it was heavy and it was dirty, and uh, it we worked together as a group with this thing where I say, light the fire within. We worked together as a team and lit the fire within each other almost as a competition to say, how much better can we make this place run? Right? Because we can't continue to do the same things over and over again. When I first got there, it was plugging of condensers and chemical pipelines and using high pressure water to clean those things out. Again, it's either you're in the freezing cold or the hot, and it's dirty. And I'm thinking to myself, this isn't what a pipe fitter does. A pipe fitter doesn't clean pipes, for crying out loud. A pipe fitter puts them together and makes them better. And it was, okay, I need to learn how this process works because I know it's not supposed to plug, right? And we had a supervisor that was a young engineer that he enjoyed working with his hands as well. And so if we worked overtime, he'd come out and he just loved getting into things in the toolboxes with us. And it was from him that I learned, all right, here's how this process works. And the reason they're plug-in is because there really needs to be a program written to ramp the boiler at a certain rate and temperature so that the temperature goes up gradually rather than blowing all this chemical up into a condenser all at once and plugging it off. And those are the things he taught me. He used to say, don't scrape the toast, right? Go out and fix the toaster. We've been scraping toast for years, right? That's how we ended up getting a pressure washer. The first one we had was 10,000 psi. The next one we got was 25,000 psi. All that did was make cleaning out junk faster. What we needed to do was stop plugging stuff up.
There you go.
And that's how you light the fire within people. When you teach them all of a sudden that, your job is more than just putting those flanges together and putting gaskets together and fitting pipe and cleaning out pipelines, you can help make this place run better. In less than 10 years, that work center size went from 28 down to 16, and nobody was fired. It was all attrition. People were like myself, got opportunities to go out and do bigger and better things. And that's kind of what inspired me to go back to night school was, I think in my bio, you said I was a maintenance supervisor. Well, gee, I thought that was going to be the best job ever. When I got it, I found out this is awful. I can't do this the rest of my life. And the reason why I say it was awful, by the way, is Kodak was downsizing. So one of the first things I had to do was, okay, here's the next two people that need to be tapped and told they're laid off. And I said to myself, my innards won't take with this, right? It just doesn't fit with who I am. And so it was, okay, it's time to go back to school.
Right.
I do believe in, light the fire within people. That will to succeed and improve it's magical in people. It really is. And people will say, well, did you get rewarded for those things? And I don't think reward was ever what the thought of it was. How can I make my life easier? How can I make this place better? And the rewards, yeah, they kind of came along with it. But realistically, I took more pride in working with people to say, how do we make things better? That really motivates folks when they can see that change.
That makes a lot of sense. Doug, could you comment on any other mistakes that you see managers making when they're trying to improve reliability?
Gosh, more than anything, it's we all have this, and I shouldn't say we all have, because that's really being general. There seems to be this thing with managers today that if I don't do something different, then I haven't put my mark on how I made this place better.
Right.
And I see managers come in and they won't even wait 6 months. It'll be weeks. And they'll stop doing something, whether it was something good or whether it was something bad, just to put their own mark on, okay, we're not going to do RCM anymore. We're going to do root cause analysis. And I go, well, you need to do both. All right. And the fact that you were doing RCM and not RCA tells me, what you need is more education. Or let's drop RCM and start doing Kaizen. And I'd say, well, those are two different things again. Right? Don't stop doing something that's good. Right? Take 6 months and look to say, all right, what do we got going on in this place that's working? And what are the things that aren't working? And if you talk to the people, whether they're maintenance or operations people, they'll tell you that. They'll tell you what works and what doesn't work. right? And that's one of the challenges I put to the teams that I work with when I'm doing RCM. I say, I never leave on a Friday and have a group tell me, "Wow, Doug, that was so much fun. I can't wait to do another one." They'll look at me and the same response that you just did, that laugh, and I go, "But if you implement this, and 3 months from now you start to see the difference, you'll be the first person on the phone to say, 'We need to do more of these,' and your life will change." Right? People know what works, and when you show them that, when you show them they have the power, and that's the magic really of RCM is, I'll get a group in on Monday morning of 5 people, and I'll sit them down at a table, and I'll say, "All right, before we get started, I want you to know I asked for the 5 best people that knew the most about this process, and you were the people that were picked."
Right.
So right away, they're learning, okay, I'm being recognized for something. And I said, now, I'm also going to ask you the question, have you ever sat at a table, the 5 of you, and had this discussion that if they'd only listened to us, this place would run so much better? And I get the head nods, and I go, this is that opportunity.
Wow.
Right? This is that you've been given that opportunity. So we're going to sit here and we're going to talk about this process and what we need to do to make it better this week. And what I need you to do is make sure it gets implemented. Because many times what we talk about this week, they'll want to pass off to somebody else and say, okay, we want the planner to implement that, or we want the maintenance supervisor to implement it, or we want the operations supervisor to implement it, or we want an engineer to implement it. I need you to make sure it gets implemented. Whoever gets charged with doing that, you need to ride them until it gets done. This is your opportunity to be able to say, we've been saying for years, if they listen, it'll run better. This is that opportunity. Don't waste it.
That's great. No, I agree 1,000%. We got to give voice to the people that are actually doing the work. That people are actually on the line and see what's really going on.
And they know what their problems are. And that's one of my favorite parts about the RCM book that I wrote. Is I tell the story of my son asking me questions about this process when he was only 14. And I had been out working on an oil platform and going back and forth on a helicopter, and I was showing him pictures. And he said to me, "Dad, what do you know about oil platforms?" And I said, "I don't know anything."
Right.
And he looks at me, he says, "Then why are they flying you out there?" I said, "Well, I have a process where I ask questions and then fill in this database, and we develop a maintenance plan. So you tell them what to maintain." I said, "No, I ask them questions, and they tell me what they need to do."
How about that?
And then he looks at me and he says, "Dad, how long do you think this will work?" Right? And his thought process was that they already know. I said, "Yeah, they do." And he said, "Why do they need you?"
Yeah. Well,
And there's a lot.
you're helping. You're opening their eyes.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's what I tell them. That they need me for structure. They need me for discipline. They need me for a salesperson, to be their voice. Right.
Sure. Doug, this has been great. Thanks so much for joining us today.
You're welcome. I've enjoyed it myself, and ever want to do another one on a different topic, I'd be more than happy to.
That sounds great. That was Doug Plucknette, principal at Allied Reliability Group. For more information about RCM Blitz, you can follow Doug's blog at www.rcmblitzblog.com. We'll post the links to his publications to the show notes for this podcast. This is Tim Rogers. Thanks very much for joining us.